Sir, electricity fluctuations இருக்கு.
Okay, okay, ma'am. A very pleasant good morning to all the participants who have joined with us in this great morning. And today we have an international webinar on use of NVivo in qualitative analysis, tips and tricks to accelerate your research, which has been organized by the Center for Research and Development of Geeta Jeevan Arts and Science College, Thuthukudi, Tamil Nadu State and India. So today we have a very wonderful resource person who is going to give us research insights into this particular topic. And he is none other Dr. Michael Jones, who is an associate professor in the Faculty of Business and Law of University of Wollongong, Australia. So before getting into this webinar, I would like to request our beloved principal, Dr. S. Malarkodi, to kindly welcome the gathering. Over to our principal, Dr. S. Malarkodi.
Good morning to all of you. And today we have all joined together for an international webinar on use of NVivo in qualitative analysis. Dr. Michael Jones has joined along with us, and he is to deliver a lecture on the use of NVivo in qualitative analysis, the tips and tricks for to accelerate the research work. So on behalf of all the participants who have joined with us, means all the Secretary of Geeta Jeevan Arts and Science College, Mr. Jeevan Jacob sir, and on behalf of our management, principal, and the faculty members, and all the participants professors, and the research scholars, I welcome Dr. Michael Jones from Australia to deliver a lecture in this international webinar on this use of NVivo in qualitative analysis. And he will provide and he will guide us with the tips and tricks for to accelerate our research work. So dear professors and the participants, make use of this rare opportunity so that it may be useful for you for your further research and as well as for your ongoing research work. And on behalf of all who have joined with us, I really feel proud to welcome Dr. Michael Jones from Australia, and welcome you, sir. And next I would like to welcome Mr. Jeevan Jacob, the Secretary of Geeta Jeevan Arts and Science College, who has motivated us to arrange this type of seminar. Next, I would like to welcome all the professors from various colleges and the research scholars and the faculty members of Geeta Jeevan Arts and Science College, and Professor Mr. Dileepan Kumar, who has taken various steps to arrange this webinar, and who is the head of the Department of Business Administration. And he is the person in charge of the Center for the Research and Development in Geeta Jeevan Arts and Science College. I also express my warm welcome to all the faculty members who are in charge of this Center for Research Development, Dr. Jayavanthi, Dr. Sangeeta Sudha, and Mrs. Rajeshwari, and all the HODs of the different departments, and the professors who have joined from various colleges, and the persons from all over the world, from various countries, and the students and the research scholars. Once again, I express my warm welcome to this international webinar on the use of NVivo in qualitative analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, beloved principal, for the nice welcome. Now I would like to request our beloved coordinator of Center for Research and Development, Dr. T. Sangeeta Sudha, to kindly introduce the resource person to the August gathering.
Thank you, sir. Today international webinar on use of the NVivo in the qualitative analysis, tips and the tricks to accelerate your research. And today you have Professor Dr. Michael Jones. Is associate professor at the Faculty of Business, University of Wollongong. Where over the last 20 years, he has taught at all the academic levels on organization, business, and management. Michael has the research strength in the qualitative analysis and developed the research interest in the areas of organizational psychology and behavior. Looking at commitment and motivational and groups dynamics, doctoral studies, the organizational culture, leadership and retention of volunteers. From 2013 to 2017, Dr. Michael was project leaders of the Australian Bushfire and the Natural Hazards Cooperative Research Center entitled Improving the Retention and Engagement of Volunteers in the Emerging Service Agencies. He led a team of interdisciplinary academics in the designing a leadership development course which was delivered to staff and volunteers at emerging service around Australia and touched on the practice and management of emerging volunteers across the world. Dr. Michael currently has over the 90 peer-reviewed published papers. Dr. Michael is a member of the Australia and New Zealand Academy of Management, the Australian Human Resource Institute, and the Industrial Relations Society of Australia. He is also editor-in-chief on the International Journals of Doctoral Studies and executive director of the Informing Service Science Institute. Dr. Michael Jones, please continue your session. Please, sir.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome. I'm quite honoured. Very happy to be here and really happy to see so many people. Now, I have a tendency to speak with an Australian accent, so I hope that doesn't put you all off, and I tend to speak very quickly. Would you like me to start the presentation now? Okay, well, I'll go ahead and share my screen. I have a small presentation, some slides, and then I'll open up NVivo and talk people through the use of NVivo. So I'll begin now and I'll share my screen. Okay, let's move things around a bit. Okay, so
yeah, it's visible, Professor.
Go ahead. Okay, so here we are, tips and tricks. I don't know how many people actually know NVivo. I'm hoping that some of you do. So NVivo is a very famous world-class program for doing qualitative analysis. The thing is, it's not just about qualitative analysis. It's great for other things. And I'll run through some of these things, not all of them. So it can do things like managing your literature, as well as literature reviews, amazing literature reviews. It does great for case management and comparative analysis, very quick and powerful comparative analysis with data. It does things like gender analysis and socio-network analysis. And it's an amazing platform for integrating quantitative with qualitative data. Anybody who has a sample of qualitative data will have quantitative elements, for example, gender or like-it elements that you can use with NVivo. It's good for creating the design for a theoretical framework. It's great for visualizing your data in many different ways. And qualitative analysis is a program of reflection, and it provides a lot of resources for reflecting. And also it's great for qualitative analysis, which is its primary function. This seminar, we only have an hour. It'll focus on what can be done, not on how to do it. The how to do it will take 12 hours, 12 hours, not 1 hour. So the goal today is showing you how it's possible to improve your research. Not how you can do it, but how NVivo can help you to do it. This is what I hope to cover today, 10 elements. Sorry. 10 elements, but we may not get through all of them in the time that we have. So starting off with a comparative analysis, very, very quick. And then I think it's very important to show you how you can create high quality literature reviews again, very, very quickly. Quickly talk about some focus group issues that you might have experienced and how we can increase focus and embed objectivity into our coding. How we can code without a transcript, so without using text. Look at some auto coding. If we have time, look at data mining and hypothesis testing, and the rest we'll see if we get there. Are there any questions before I start? I can't see comments, so if you're typing comments, I won't be able to see them. All right, so let's start then, and I'm going to start with this comparative analysis. Now, this is an example of a comparative analysis I did for a presentation I gave to industry. And what I wanted to illustrate was that there is a difference between the way we see men and women. What I did was I took 10 articles from a newspaper that were based on men and 10 based on women. And I did a very quick analysis. It took me seconds to look at the language that was being used. And you can see here quite clearly, love, nurturing, feminine. These are things that women were seen to be talking about. And with men, it's things like work, play, independence, all of these things. And you can see there is a gender divide in the way we see men and women. So for this seminar today, I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I talk about this a lot, but I haven't actually run it. So I wanted to look at President Donald Trump. What were his speeches before or as he just came into office? And at the end of his office, what were his? So I took 5 speeches at the beginning, 5 speeches at the end. And I could have played with this a lot more. We can see, for example, great is prominent, country is prominent. They're not differentiating, so they're not as useful for our analysis. But we can see things like China, very fixated on China at the end, and things like, I think border is here somewhere, protect, border. And these were things he was talking about at the beginning of his presidency. Okay, that being said now, I'll open NVivo. Okay, so here is NVivo. If you haven't used it before, there are 3 main areas. Here is where we store our data. And you can see, for example, there are interviews in here. So that's our data. And here is our code. So this is the stuff we will code over time. And it usually looks like a node tree like this. The rest of the stuff, all this down here, are all advanced features that we'll touch on at some point or another. Now, I said the first one we're going to do is a comparative analysis. And I've put into my data speeches of Donald Trump, the beginning and the end. So if I want to do a comparative analysis, it's very, very easy. At this point, all I have done is downloaded 10 of his speeches. It took me about 3 minutes and put the information in here. Now, in about another 3 minutes, I can complete my analysis and I can start to comment on it. So to do that, I go to queries and I go new query and word frequency. I just tell it where to look. So I go to selected folders. Oops. People are writing on my screen. Can't see it. Comparison. Beginning. Okay. Is it possible for someone to clear the scribble? Now I drop this down to the middle. I get the top 30 items and look for longer words. Now, if I run this query, my computer's running slower than it usually would. I can now have a look at that word map, word cloud. So that's that search run again. This is his 5 speeches before, or as he joined office. I could run it again after. But what's really good about this is that we get more than just a word cloud. Go back to our summary and we can have a look at the words that he's using most frequently. So for example, if we're looking at country, we can see what he's talking about around country. So, oops. So we can see from this, I mean, country may not have been a good example, but we get an idea of what's being said around those particular issues. So what a great country, and goes on to talk about America. So what we have then is, as I said, very quickly, we have this ability to do a comparative analysis of anything. I mean, gender's a good one, as I showed you with the previous slides, but very quickly we can see, okay, these are the issues that are important at that time. And then we can drill further into that to see, okay, what is the discussion around each of those terms? So that, and if we want to do it again, so as I said, this is pre, this is before, we can change it to after now. So we can save this and change it to after. This is the end, go okay, and run query. Okay, so you can see it is different. It's certainly a different image, and the words have changed slightly. And again, if we wanted to, we could drill in on this and have a look at the words that are being used. Okay, so that's the first one, the comparative analysis. Does anyone have any questions about the comparative analysis? Okay, now the next one is, how do we create a high quality literature review very quickly? So in Australia, we have a classification of A star, A, B, and C level journals. So I'm talking here about an A star level literature review, which ordinarily would take us a couple of months to write. We can do it in a couple of days with NVivo. So what I've done is put in some literature, and here's, so as was introduced, I'm the editor-in-chief of a journal, and I've thrown in some literature, not from that journal, but all of the journals on doctoral studies. There are 250 of these, and they're about doctoral studies. So let's say I want to look at learning. So how do doctoral students learn? What I can do is, so I'm going to write a literature review about learning, go back to my queries, go new query, text search, type in learning. I'll select my folder, which was the literature. And NVivo will create synonyms. So it creates a like a dictionary of terms. And sometimes it determines what they are by reading through the material we ask it to read. I always start in the middle, good place to start. And then go run query. It may take a few minutes. So while it's running, if you have questions, it's a good time to ask. Any questions while we're running it, run?
So audience, participants, if you have any questions related to the this analytical part, you can even put forth your questions, or you can even put it in the chat box so that Professor Michael can have a view on it.
Yeah, it's hard for me to read chats because I'm doing this. So if you want to somebody take responsibility to just read out any chats, that would be fantastic. Okay.
Sometimes even if you want to do some, if you want the professor to redo it, to know more, you can even put it in the chat box so that he can explain more about that particular concept to us. So let us make it more interactive so that we can learn a lot.
Okay. So what we have now, NVivo has gone ahead and scanned through all of those 250 papers to find things that are of use to us. So if I sort these by coverage and go to the top, so you can see some of these are quite important to read. Let's have a look at what it's created. It's stuck. Okay. All right. Now, the value of this is you can throw in as many journal articles as you like, and you can do that through EndNotes. And as a result, we have metadata. So every one of these journal articles, looks like it's going to be slow to load them up. So each of these has metadata associated with it. So I can do this. So we can see that the author, the date, all of this information is in here. Everything from EndNotes. But the real value of this is that it has sorted the papers that we need to read. So it's saying these top 15 or so are the important ones to read. And within each paper, it'll tell us where we need to read. So the beauty of NVivo here is it can read hundreds of papers. You don't have to worry about how relevant they are. NVivo will go through and find the relevant ones and then show you where within each journal you need to read, you need to quote which journals or which papers are the seminal papers for your literature review. Any questions about that? All right. The other thing we can do with our literature is that we can do a meta-analysis. I should have rebooted my computer before we started. I think it's going very, very slow. Okay, so here's the metadata of all of those papers, and we can do advanced analysis on this and graphical analysis based on trends over years. So we have our years here, based on which journal article and so on. The next thing I want to show you is an issue that some of us might have with focus groups. So the problem with focus groups is that we don't always get contextualized information. What I mean by that is if I ask you, what is your favorite way of traveling to work? And some people might say, I catch the bus. Some people might say, I like to walk. Later, when you're categorizing that information, when you code it, you lose the question, you lose the context. So later, when you put it into a node called bus, and you've got people, I like to take the bus, you have no way of putting the question back into that. So what we can do with NVivo is put that question back in. I'm going to put some focus groups in. Here we go. So this is some focus group information that I collected back in 2011. That was the last time I did a focus group. So here I'm asking them, what do you enjoy most about working in the SES? The SES is an emergency organisation that uses volunteers. And you can see the companionship. So I'd code that into perhaps socialisation. There's one down here, the friendship, yeah. That friendship again, socialisation. But later when I code that, I'm going to see this stuff, the companionship, and not know what it's about. So what I can do with NVivo is to recontextualize. So I copy that and then highlight all of these. So these are the sub-questions. Highlight all the responses and go links, new annotation, and then just paste the question in. And now, whenever I code this to a node, I will be able to see this question like a footnote. So it enables us to recontextualize. All good? Any questions? All right. I hope you're keeping up with me. We're covering a lot of stuff. Okay, number 4 was improving focus and embedding objectivity into coding. So by its very nature, qualitative analysis is subjective. So we are supposed to be biased by what we find, and we have a very personalized interpretation of what's going on. But that doesn't mean that we can't embed objectivity when we need to. And there's a way that we can code and still have objectivity and focus. So here's a bunch of interviews. I'll open one up to show you what it looks like. So here's a question, and then there's responses to these questions. Now, the usual way to code is to do interview by interview. So this is an interview on Barbara, and we remember talking to Barbara. Barbara was a very nice lady. She might have influenced and biased us in some way. So straight away, there's some bias and subjectivity when we start to code. But we can remove that by coding, but by changing it into questions. So if I highlight all of these interviews now, and you could have hundreds, I can go auto code. There's all different types of auto coding. It's according to the way that we formatted the document. So it's running through each of those now, and it's passing information into nodes. Right, now if I go to my nodes, I have this one that I've just created called Auto 1, and you can see all of my questions here. The difference between these is they're slightly different, so it's created 2 separate questions. I can merge that into that one. So these are my questions. If I expand, I can see each individual response, but I don't want that. What I want is all responses to that first question. So this is the first one, Barbara. I'll go down to the next one, Charles, and so on. You can see all of your responses to one question. So I've talked a lot about objectivity. What we're doing is removing that overall impression of our interviewees by doing this. They're all lumped in here together. You don't care about the person, just the data. Secondly, it provides a good focus. So right here, my question is connection to Down East. So I'm looking at personalized connection to an area. The next question or other questions will have a different focus. So my coding is very much more controlled by doing this auto coding in the first place, by creating focus. Okay, that's that done. Any questions on that? Are there any questions that people are texting or anything?
So one question is like, is there any prior knowledge on coding that a researcher has to have?
I guess coding is a skill, but you learn it very quickly. So it's just a matter of looking at, so the best way to start is tabula rasa, which means a blank head, no idea, no preconceived notions, and highlighting value-laden text. So something where your participant is telling you something of value, and then including some context that gives that value meaning and throwing that into a node. And with NVivo, there are 3 styles of coding. So you start off with NVivo coding, which means I don't know what I'm collecting yet. I don't know what it all means. And as you progress, you start to get dimensionality to it, where you become quite an expert in what you're collecting, and you start to be quite discerning as to what it means and where it goes. So it doesn't take long, but it's better off starting not knowing what to do and just collecting value and text, or value and context.
Thank you, Professor. One more thing is like out of this particular thing that what I have shown right now, no, by connecting the nodes, I think that we can easily find the respondents of the survey questions, what they have respondents, how they have replied to a question, that we can find out of this in our survey. I hope so.
So are you saying because you can see their names, it's not impacting as much on objectivity? And if that is the question, that's absolutely true. But when you do it across questions rather than across participants, your level of subjectivity reduces. So you're building in levels of objectivity that you couldn't have done before. After a while, you just ignore the names because it's just data. So while they are there and you can refer to them, you tend not to. It's like when we mark exams, after a while, we stop looking at the student names. It's just reading and trying to get it done as fast as we can. Okay, the next thing I was going to show was coding directly from audio. So one of the issues we have, and it's certainly a bigger issue in the past than it is today, is the time and the cost of creating transcripts. Now, NVivo has an ability to avoid the need for transcripts by working with audio or visual data. So I'll show you what I mean. So if we open up this one, for example, so this is a video, clearly, and I should be able to play. You may not hear this, but you can see they're talking. Well, they will be in a second. Now, what we can do is code directly from this. So we can, and I'll just show you how to do it manually, but you do it through an automatic way. So it's very hard for you to see this, but there's a blue box. This is the blue box that you create, the same as you would if you're coding text. So it's got the blue box kind of thing here. That's our text. This is a transcript, by the way, that someone else has created. So with an audio or a visual, audio-visual, we can code directly from this. One of the advantages of it is that, well, the disadvantage is that our brains are much more configured to receive text. We can read ahead, we can look at what's coming in terms of our text. Can't do that with audio. You don't know what they're going to say until they say it. However, a big part of what we need to do, so let's say we are asking boys and girls in the playground why they like apples and why they like oranges. And we've collected information in the apples node and information in the oranges node. And now we want to think about the reasons children eat apples. So we read through all of the interviews, all the bits that relate to apples, and try to get an understanding, a reflection on why kids eat apples. Well, when we do that, we'll have pages and pages and pages of text that we need to read, and it gets boring. And as we're reading it, we start to shut off. So one of the advantages of having audio is that we don't need to read. We actually relax, sit back, and we have a whole stack of audio snippets that we can just listen to and reflect. So the reflection part is much easier. Another advantage is when you want to present your data, you don't have to present just boring text. You can actually present the audio, which is far more impactful. So it's an alternate way of doing things that you can do with NVivo. Sorry, my lights keep turning off. Okay, anything else with regard to that? Okay, so another thing we can do is auto coding. So back to say in our interviews. So most of the coding we do is manual coding, where we go in. So this is an interview with Dorothy, and we highlight some text and we put this into a node. So this is a very elementary part of NVivo. Let's say that we're looking at attitudes. So we might say, okay, she's talking here about attitude, and we can drag that into negative, for example. That's the manual approach to coding. And it's okay, it's fine. And later I'll show you, if we get there, faster ways to code. But it's basically just dragging and dropping or doing other things to put them into nodes. Now, when we have a lot of data, or if we're in a hurry to get some coding done quickly, we can use NVivo to do a lot of this for us. So again, I'm going to go back to my queries. And let's have a look at this data, all the interviews that they've collected. What are these people talking about? So you can imagine that someone's given you 10 interviews and said, hey, quick, take these. I've got a paper I want to write for this conference. You've got 24 hours to do it. Well, here's where NVivo will actually do that for you. And within a couple of hours, you can have a paper written for a conference very quickly. So go to queries. First, we want to see what are the words these people are talking about? What are the issues that's on their mind? So we have word frequency query. We used that earlier. This time I'm going to select the interviews. Look at the top 30. And again, only 5 letters or more. And run. So again, someone's given you a set of data and said, do something with it. I've just given you this data, really, you don't know what it is. And we can see here now that the things that are interesting to these people is their identity with place, water. So this is, you don't know what this data is, but by looking at this, you might start to get an idea. It's about environmental change, and looking largely about water impact, the impact of development. So when they have spoken to these participants, these are the things they're concerned about. So we could say, okay, I want to write a paper about water, change, and development. So let's have a look at what I can code. So after doing that, then we write those words down, water, change, and development, do a new query, text search, and I'll just do one. Let's have a look at water. This time we'll put a spread in. And run query. So now what I've got is roughly 16 words plus 5, so 26 words, all looking at water in this case. I can throw or save these to a node called water, move to my next one, change, do it again on development, and suddenly or instantly, I've got 3 nodes that are talking about these issues that the participants have. And because they're quite rough, I might do another code from this. So this is quite broad. From that, I might create a more refined node called water. Generally, when we do it, auto searches like this, we capture 80% of the data. So that means there might be some elements to the interviews that we're going to miss. Around about 20% we can't catch. We can if we do it manually, but not automatically. So we're losing about 80%, sorry, about 20% of the valuable data. And in addition, we've got 20% junk in there. So some of this stuff is not going to be useful at all, but it's not too bad because it's only taking seconds to go through all of those interviews to code for water, change and development is likely to take a couple of days. We've got a rough one in just a couple of minutes. So it really speeds up our approach to analysis. Now, data mining and hypothesis testing, we'll move with that. It's quite complex. So just have a look at what we're doing rather than trying to remember what I do. But the problem is we often have data that we don't utilize. Anybody who's done or doing a PhD, you're only using a very small part of all that data you collected. Or if someone's given you a data set and you want to get something out of it, NVivo will help you data mine it. And we can do that largely through the cross connection of putting in quantitative data and setting up hypotheses. So again, looking at the interview data, I've classified each of these people, and I've called them demographics. And if I open that up, we can see what information I've put in. So I've classified each of the interviewees as male, female, or not applicable. I've talked about their socioeconomic status being high or low. That could be Leichhardt. And I've also talked about their education. And from this, we could create some hypotheses. So I could, and I know this to be true, I could hypothesize that women take greater care of our environment and men treat it more like a place for action and sports. So men take a utilitarian approach to the environment. Women take a more aesthetic approach to the environment. So how can I prove that? Well, this has already been, so I've created these quantitative elements and I know that already coded into my nodes are attitudes. So not me, this is the database that comes with NVivo. They've gone ahead and interviewed those people and said, yeah, what's negative about what's going on in this environment and what do you find is positive and mixed and neutral. So now I know a mix of men and women saying negative and positive things about environmental change. So I can quickly create a query to test my hypothesis. So I do a new query, matrix. And matrix is a combination of quantitative and qualitative. So I'll add my quantitative. There are my demographics. And I want to put in gender. And I want to look at socioeconomic. So the second hypothesis might be that the higher you are in terms of economic status, the more likely you are to look after the environment. It could be true or not, I don't know, but we can test it. So, okay, I've added those. Now I add my coded data. And go run. So what it's given us now is chopped up that qualitative information according to the quantitative variables we've told it to look for. We can change this to percentage agreement. Column row. We can do things like shading it if we wanted to. But and we can also chart it very quickly. So this gives an indication of the visualization of NVivo. So we get this nice interactive three-dimensional graph. But we're more interested in this. So now what we've got are a bunch of virtual cells. So what do the females say that is negative about environment? We double click on that and we've filtered it according to just females. And now we've got this virtual node that as with anything qualitative, we now need to reflect on this and say, okay, what are just the women saying that is negative about the environment? And let's compare that to what the men are saying, or what they're saying that's positive, or what the men are saying that's negative. Now, it looks pretty simple, but there's a lot of work gone into this, and the ability to slice and dice qualitative data according to quant is very, very complex and very novel and very useful. Okay, any questions about that one? All right. How are we going for time? What time do I need to finish? Dr. Dillard? Okay, I'll keep going.
Yes, Professor. Yes, Professor.
How much time do I have?
You can take your time, Professor. Not an issue.
Okay.
Another 10
right.
or 10 minutes. Yeah.
10 minutes? That's perfect. Thank you. Now, one of the things that we have with qualitative analysis is how do you communicate what you're finding? So you would have created, in your time, you will create notes. And this is the real power of what you're finding, is what's in these nodes. And NVivo has a great facility to create reports. So for ways of you to print out and share with your professors all of the findings. But really, you don't need to do that. The best way to show what you've done is to export the node. So go to balance, it usually shows a nice one. So if I want to show what I've done, or if I want to go away from technology and reflect on what I've found. So at this stage, you've come to a saturated, your nodes have become saturated. That's a qualitative term meaning no new data or new interviews won't produce new information. So you've got basically everything you need. So we right click on this, export node. Sometimes if they're very big, they can take a long time. And you can give this to your professor who doesn't need to have NVivo, doesn't need to have knowledge of NVivo. They can use it straight away. So now it's exported it to a browser. In my case, it's Firefox. It can be any browser. And here you can see all elements of what you've collected in that particular node. So these are segments of interviews. Here we have some audio, and you can play this, and all the video, and you can play these as well. So again, it's great for reflecting, or great for showing your mum what you've been doing. Again, without the need to have knowledge of or access to NVivo. So that's exporting. Now, top-down coding. What we usually do with qualitative data is bottom-up coding. So it's data-driven. So we collect some interviews and we start reading them and coding them. And what we find determines how we code and what we start to create in terms of theory. That's most of it. Maybe 60% or 70% of all qualitative is bottom-up, data-driven. But it doesn't have to be. You can be top-down. Top-down is usually where you have a theoretical model or a theoretical framework, or you have a survey. So you're asking very specific questions and looking for very specific information back. What NVivo allows you to do is to create this in NVivo. So we go wireless maps. We can create a new mind map. So let's say we're going to talk to people about, I've already created one, healthy food choices. So we're creating a theoretical model, or we might have one already and we just put it in here on healthy food choices. So we can see if we're going to ask kids at school what kind of food they're going to eat, we might be assessing them on sugar, fat, maybe salt. So I can create a child called salt. Perhaps if we're talking about food, why not also ask about exercise? So we could do exercise as well. If we're talking about fat, we might want to talk about saturated fat and non-saturated fat. So, forget my spelling. And we could create a sibling called non-saturated. So what we're doing here is creating a theoretical framework, and eventually we'll be looking for data to confirm this model. So we'll start to, when people talk about high sugar, the kids might talk about having candy after school. You throw that evidence into here. They might say that every Thursday they play football. So you put that evidence in there and so on. So what we can do is see this as a model. So if I press this button here, it'll remodel it. But the real beauty of this is once we have our theoretical framework, we can throw this into the codes and start coding to it. So we can go create as nodes. Okay. Now we'll go to our nodes. And here it is here, food, exercise, fat content, and everything else. So now when we start looking at our interviews, talking about Dorothy, go back to our nodes, and there's our food nodes there, and we talk about, and Dorothy's talking about having hot dogs or high fat things. We can put them into there, and we start to code into that. So again, most coding is bottom up. In this case, it's top down, where we have a really clear idea of what we want to collect, and how they're connected together. Okay, the last thing I'm going to show you is fast coding. So one of the things we can do with NVivo is to code as fast as we can read. So when you're looking at literature, for example, in the old days, we used to print it out and get a highlighter and make comments in the margins or something. And, you know, that was pretty fast. We could read and just do things as we're going. NVivo can be used to do all of your literature without having a time cost associated with it. So we can code as fast as we can read. It takes a little bit of practice, but once we get there, we're okay. So I'll open up some literature. And I'll put up my nodes. So I've got literature on the right-hand side, nodes on the left. And what I really want to do is expand all of them, because eventually you'll have hundreds of nodes and it becomes unmanageable. Like if you look at my scroll bar now, there's so much. And I know I've created some of these just now. There's a lot to do. So NVivo has a lot of tools to help us to code into these. So the easiest one, of course, is drag and drop. That's pretty fast. So highlight it, drag it, and drop it. But there's others as well. For example, if I want to create a new node, so I found this thing about pressure. Let's say students are under pressure. So I can highlight that, and down the bottom, you may not be able to see it, but down here there's this thing called Code NVivo. If I click on that, it creates a new node. So down here somewhere is pressure. Probably down the bottom, but no. There it is, pressures. So now I've created that node and I can throw this into there. I can drag and drop, or I can just go down here, it says pressures, so I just go tick. And let's say I've done this bit here, and this goes with something I coded recently. Let's say it goes into fat. So I know I did that recently. Is saturated and go tick. That's it. And there are other things as well. There are hotkeys. So Control F8, for example. So code F2, Control F8, Control F2, Control F8, and so on. There's lots of fast ways to code. So the promise is you can code as fast as you can read, and you certainly can. And if you have NVivo, I really recommend that you use it for all of your literature now and in the future. Okay, that's me done with this presentation. I'm certainly open to questions or complaints.
Thank you, Professor, for the nice insights into this NVivo software. Actually, for most of the participants here who have joined with us, it may be an eye-opener for them to know about this great insights of this NVivo software, because most of the professors, we won't use this because we are still on the collecting of data, and in what we are doing the survey, based on that we are doing the research. But this is again one way of a big data analysis. You can even go with sentimental analysis and all those things in this NVivo by taking the unstructured data, putting it in a nutshell from a newspaper archives for 10 to 15 years. What was the very biggest accident that has happened in a particular region, either a two-wheeler accident or it may be a four-wheeler accident, which have a highest score. That thing we can even do with this NVivo software. So it is again a great insight what you have told the professor. So like how an interview video clippings can be put in, can be uploaded, and from that we can extract some data. Through some literature also we can do some research, and at the same time with the news articles. As I told, we have in India Hindu newspaper, so getting from the archives of Hindu newspaper website 15-20 years back, we can even collect that thing, and we can come up with the number of two-wheeler accidents for a period of time, and we can advise the government to take some regulations or some other measures to control that accident. So properly that can be done out of this NVivo thing. And the social media, again, it is the much more benefit for us. The moment when we go to a bank to open an account, instead of going and finding someone else to come up with a word of mouth, you can even put it over there on Twitter. How many of them have opined whether opening an account and so bank is good or not? Because some customers, they might have come across with some negative experience. So even that can also be done in this NVivo. So the negative impacts, if there is one particular bank where customers have been opined for negative aspects, we can even go with an alternate bank to open the account. So all those unstructured data can be put up here in this NVivo software, and we can do research, and we can take this research in another perspectives, in another level when we're talking about qualitative, because we all go with giving a questionnaire to the respondents, collecting the information from the respondents, and with the structured questionnaire and structured data only, most of the scholars they used to go with doing the research. But this is another way of doing the research. Even talking about computer science background people, they can do more with the use of this NVivo software. So participants, literally we have a very 1 hour session. Literally we have a very great insights about this NVivo software in particular. So if you have any queries or any other questions, you can even put it in the chat box so that we can take over that to Professor for answer. So let us make this webinar more deliberations, bigger deliberations. Professor, one professor from Malaysia has said that they are going to install all the copies of their literature review in NVivo in order to see the variables.
Great idea, yeah. And so Dr. Hudson asked, is it useful in literature reviews? It absolutely is, yeah. And as you said, Dr. Dillip, it's social media. It actually has, it retrieves social media and metadata automatically. So I didn't demonstrate that because it takes a long time, but you can go in and get information from LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, and it'll harvest that information with all of the metadata.
Another question is, Professor, is the software is useful for quantitative research in literature reviews?
Well, the only use of quantitative with literature or any data is to slice up or interrogate the qualitative. It won't do statistics or anything like that. It's only a means of filtering. But you can do very complex filtering though.
Thank you, Professor. What about your opinion on this auto coding in this software, Professor?
Sorry, what did you say?
Is there any auto coding instead of people those who doesn't know about coding, they can even move with auto coding?
Yeah, it has a lot of about 6 different styles of auto coding. The one I showed you is just one, so it'll do things like sentiment analysis, but it'll also thematically analyze as well. So it'll read your data and start to create a node tree based on thematic analysis. I haven't found it to be very accurate, but it will do it.
Thank you, Professor. And I hope that out of this NVivo, we can go over the tree mapping, word frequency mapping, cluster analysis, and all those things. But what about creating a model out of this NVivo?
Creating a
model. If there is some issues, it's going to happen, coming up with a model.
Yeah, so creating a model is quite easy. I didn't show you because it's not as advanced as a tip and trick, but you can have a look at what you're coding, your coding tree, and represent that graphically with a model very easily.
Sure, Professor. And most of the time when you're moving with this NVivo, we do have some, we'll be doing some coding and we'll be taking the aggregated nodes. That is, for example, I do have some child nodes. And when you take this aggregate nodes, that will sum up with the parent node. That is what is advisable when you're moving with the research, when analytic part.
Yeah, so that's what we were doing when I was looking at focused. So looking at all the individual questions and then aggregating them to the parent node. Yeah, absolutely, that's the best way to do it. You know a lot about this.
Yeah. So thank you, Professor. Thank you for the nice session. Dear participants, the attendance and feedback link has been posted or rolled out on the chat box. You can even click and leave your feedback and attendance so that that will facilitate us to leave, provide you with the e-certificate within a week of time period. So already for the past webinars, it is in process and we are moving on. So kindly leave your feedback and attendance so that that will facilitate us to provide you with the e-certificate. So we came to the end of this particular this webinar. So it is indeed a great privilege for me to propose the vote of thanks on this international webinar on use of NVivo in qualitative analysis, tips and tricks to accelerate your research, which has been organized by the Center for Research and Development of Geeta Jeevan Arts and Science College. So Professor Michael, again, at the outset, it gives me great privilege to have Professor Michael here. The moment when I was calling him over phone and I was discussing about this webinar, he was readily accepted, and he has all the way, because with all amidst his busy schedule and hectic work pattern, he has readily accepted and he has graced this occasion and he has come up with a very informative session today. So thank you on behalf of Geeta Jeevan Arts and Science College Management, Principal, my own behalf and behalf of the Center for Research and Development team and the professors team and the participants who have joined with us. So thank you very much, Professor Michael Jones, for the acceptance and for the great insights into this NVivo, and which is again new for most of the people here in India. So thank you very much, Professor. Next, I would like to thank our beloved management, Mr. P. Jeevan Chakap, who is the great source of support for us in making all the programs by giving us permission. So thank you very much, sir. Next, I would like to thank our beloved principal, Dr. S. Malarkodi, who is again a source of motivation whenever and wherever that required. So thank you, Malarkodi ma'am, for giving this permission and for being a part of this great program. Thank you very much, ma'am. Next, I would like to thank Professor Dr. Bala from Malaysia, from University of Malaysia, Kelantan, who is an advisory committee member of our institution, as well as a visiting professor in the Department of Business Administration of our college, for his support and for his cooperation in all the meetings what we organize. Whenever we organize any programs, immediately Professor Bala will be joining with us. So thank you very much, Professor. Keep on supporting, being as a visiting professor in the Business Administration of our institution. Next, I would like to thank all the HODs, professors, scholars and students of our own institution, as well as participants from various institutions across the globe who have joined with us this morning for this wonderful webinar. So once again, I thank you one and all for this nice webinar and for your active participation and your support and your cooperation. I would like to thank Professor Albert, who has joined us from Malaysia. So thank you very much, Professor Albert. So I would again, it is my great privilege to thank. We have one professor from Indonesia, Dr. Aryana Satriana, who have joined from Indonesia. So we have various participants from across the globe. So that is again a great honor to Gita Jeevan Arts and Science College. So once again, I thank you one and all. Thank you all. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you, Professor Michael. I request the participants to kindly switch on your camera so that we can have a screenshot of this webinar, so that it can be taken as a token of remembrance as well as for a record. I request the participants to kindly switch on your camera. I request the participants to kindly switch on the camera so that we can go with a screenshot of this webinar. Yes. Professor Chandrasekhar. One minute, hold on. Not able to do the screenshot. Yes, we have done this screenshot. So thank you very much. Thank you, participants. Thank you, Professor Bala. Thank you, Professor Albert, Professor Ashley. Thank you, our resource person for this international webinar, Professor Dr. Michael Jones. We'll keep in touch with you, Professor. So probably we'll be adding you also in our visiting faculty panel, so that you can also give your inputs for the institution to make the institution to grow more to the next level. So thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you. The mic is in mute, Professor.